and I happen to be the CPIO for our department. I'm getting around 30 RTI applications every month, and it's not easy. I have to give a reply within the time frame, and most of these RTI applications, I feel like just throwing them off. Because what I feel is they just have to come here. Some of them are smart enough to say that we require this for the research, but others they can ask for anything. I've had RTI seeking. I'll just tell you, I'm sure you'll understand in Hindi also. Gandhiji ka lathi, the stick that Gandhiji was using, what wood was that? What was the length of the lathi? Where will you find it? And another RTI was on who gave where is the notification of the title Mahatma Gandhi? So that was one time my name was flashed across the channel, because I had given a reply saying that we have no information. Honestly, we don't have any information because there was no such notification. So then the query was, if National Archives of India doesn't have the notification, then who will have it? Then again it comes back. Anyway, that is the kind of query we are getting. So what I'm saying is, instead of RTI, it's much better if you throw open the archives, you publicize more about what is there in an archive, so that more and more people come to you and use the material there. After all, these are government records and everybody has a right to see them. And as far as the private papers are concerned, private papers, like whatever is in our custody, okay, we'll have information. But honestly, nobody will know which are the private custodial institutions and what kind of material is there. So for that, National Archives of India, along with the state archives, had come up with a program of compiling something called a National Register of Private Records, NRPR. This was started sometime in the 1970s, but unfortunately that has almost come to a stop because the state archives were not very forthcoming. Why? Because there was no financial support for that. You can't expect people to go on hunting spree without money. So, but whatever we have, there are 1820 volumes of this NRPR. So, in case any of you wants to have any information related to that, you can. Like that's where I came to know about the Sringeri Italian manuscripts. There are a lot of other private institutions and private families, who have records. All that has been consolidated.
Excuse me, what is this thing on church, mosque or temple records made open only for their followers?
Yeah,
How
that
is
is
that?
no. See, these are private. Quite possible that one church may say that only if you are a part of our church, we'll show you the record. How can you say anything? Similarly, you go to any, I'm sure there are manuscripts in many of these Hindu houses. They are very particular about the caste, and they are not, on the face of it, they may not say it, but there are people who deny it.
It doesn't come under our state.
No, but if they take any grant from National Archives of India, then we can say that you have been given grant by National Archives of India. But till now, that is not the same. Well, I think I've already told you about National Archives of India, but I'll also tell you, like when we set up, we were established in 1891. It was called the Imperial Record Department, and since then, the way we have grown, it's an organic growth. Like we have the main head office in National Archives of India, Delhi. We have 3 record centers in 3 zones, that is in Jaipur, Bhubaneswar and Pondicherry, and we have a regional office at Bhopal. Regional office at Bhopal also happens to be the security archives. Like suppose, because Delhi is standing in a place which is, there's always a threat, whether it be natural calamity, like we say that Delhi is sitting on an earthquake zone. So there's a possibility that any day anything can happen. Also, it's very near to Pakistan and there are missiles which are expected, so there should be a backup. So the security archives is everything that we have a program where they are microfilmed and the microfilm is kept far away in Bhopal. So that's the security aspect. And the total bulk of records I mentioned earlier we have records from the middle of 18th century, from 1748 onwards till 1986. In fact, I have records till 1990s, but since we follow the 30-year rule up to 1986, you can consult the record. The total shelf space of records is around 45 kilometer shelf space. Can you imagine 45 kilometer shelf space of records? It's spread across 2 buildings, and now I am short of space. Just before coming, I moved a file saying that I may not be able to take in more records unless and until we go for new forms of shelving. Like you have something called compactor shelving. You might have seen, where these Godrej shelves are there which move on wheels. So one place to another, you can add more space. So that is the kind of records we have. And in terms of files, we have around 54 lakh files, around 1 lakh volumes, around 1.2 lakh maps. Maps are another precious series that we have, but underutilized. Then we have treaties with most of the chieftains, rulers. In fact, this China thing which has come up, Darjeeling issue, we have treaties. That's one thing the government wanted to see, the treaty dating back to 1891 with Sikkim and Bhutan. We have the original treaties with us, and that was one of the treaties, in fact, was signed by Victoria, Queen Victoria. That's one of the treaties. But this is, as I said, the earliest record series. In regular series, it starts from the middle of 18th century. But the earliest record that we have, it's a priceless manuscript in birch bark. It's the Gilgit manuscript. Do you know where is Gilgit? It's now in Pakistan occupied Kashmir. This Gilgit manuscript, if you Google it, you'll know. It has a very interesting story. Once some shepherds were going around, and one of them was sitting prodding his cane onto something. There was a small mound, he was prodding it. And suddenly he came across this resistance. He started digging up. And when he dug up, he found this beautiful casket. A casket. He took it out, and there were these manuscripts. Manuscripts in birch bark. Birch bark, do you know what is birch bark? Birch bark is basically, these are trees which are found only high up in the Himalayan region. The bark of that tree, that is taken, and on that, like we have a palm leaf document, birch bark is like that. So, birch bark records, Gilgit manuscripts are written, and it's dating back to the 6th century. And the script is not yet fully deciphered. But again, like what I mentioned about Genealogical Society of Bhutan, most of the researchers who come to us wanting to consult the Gilgit manuscripts are foreign nationals. You have Italians, you have Japanese. So ultimately, National Archives of India, what we did is we entered into an agreement with Shokai University in Tokyo. They have digitized everything, and now they are giving us all these facsimile prints. That's really a marvelous way of preserving. We don't have to show the originals or anything. So that's the earliest document that we have. Maps dating back to 1700 to say 1980s. We have the maps. We have historical maps. We have revenue maps. Revenue maps are very useful for people who are trying to trace their family and their landed property and all. Then we have printed and published maps. A lot of these kind of records. Private papers, we have over 500 collections of private papers. We have Gandhi papers, we have Rajendra Prasad papers, G.V. Pant papers. Lot of them. And Gandhi Kallenbach and Gandhi Polar collections were acquired from an auction. Rather, we purchased it from Sotheby's. And Sardar Patel papers. In fact, as far as the Malayali collections are concerned, there's a diary of C.K. Nair. C.K. Nair was one of the persons who accompanied Gandhiji on Dandi Yatra. So one of my colleagues, we were putting up an exhibition, and he said, we found this interesting diary. And where was the diary? It was found by somebody in we call them kabaddi walas. That's the people who collect these old newspapers and all that. So from the kabaddi wala, this person, he saw that handwriting and the paper, he thought it's something unique. week, and he went through that. He found that it's of somebody who had accompanied Gandhi. So he bought it from the kabadiwala, probably gave him 50 rupees and he took it. But that is one of the priceless records. And he didn't give us the original. He allowed us to microfilm. So we have the microfilm copy of C.K. Nair's diary. And that's, daily, like whatever happened right from 4 o'clock in the morning, they all used to get up in the morning, and how the daily routine, what happened, how many kilometers they walked, what they ate, everything is there. In fact, a few months back somebody came, Harvard University wants to have a copy of that diary because they want to use it for their management studies. How that? So I was just thinking, from where to where, from the kabadiwala to Harvard University, how it is going. So you never know. Don't just ignore any old paper that you can. You just go through it before you throw it out. Now, as far as I've already talked to you about the liberalization and all that. Now, I'll just briefly talk to you about Public Record Act. That's the act I've been telling you, which was, the act was promulgated in 1993. It covers all the central government institutions, autonomous institutions, statutory bodies, union territory administration. So almost, and what is very significant is that the state is not covered. State archives are not covered. State records are not coming under this. So we can only request the state government to do anything. We cannot force ourselves on the state archives. They can have their own legislation. Some of the state archives have come up with their own archives and legislations, like Bihar, Punjab, they have their own legislation. Others, what they do is, they'll say that we are following the National Archives of India, so we follow the Public Record Act. And it's not exactly binding on them. They can have different, their own set of rules. As per these rules, basically it gives a guideline on what kind of record management activities are to take place, how it is to be done, what is the role of National Archives of India. DG National Archives is supposed to ensure that records which are over 25 years old, they are to be appraised for the, or rather evaluated, and ultimately records of permanent value are to come to National Archives of India. That is the duty of the DG National, Director General National Archives of India. Till they remain with the record creating agency, that is covered by another set of rules. We cannot force ourselves on them. But there are clear guidelines on that also. And once the records come to us, we are given another 5 years. Records which are over 30 years old are to be shown to anybody who comes to archives and fulfills the requirements later on. Now, I'll tell you about the issues later on. This is another aspect Professor Francis wanted me to talk about, the classified records. While the records are generated in any government setup, there may be some records which are to be kept confidential. There are 4 categories of classification: confidential, restricted, secret, and top secret. Confidential and secret are at the lower level. NSO or an armed secretary can do that. But secret and top secret, this classification is done only at the top level. Generally, Joint Secretary and the top. Now, Government of India, and how is this done? There is a manual of departmental security instructions issued by Ministry of Home Affairs. That is the guideline based on which these security classifications are marked. Like, I'll tell you, say medical treatment of VVIPs, like the Prime Ministers and all. That will not be covered under RTI also. These are security documents, or anything related to our activities, military activities. These will never come to us. These will have that confidential marking on them. But RTI says that no record is to be permanently kept as confidential. Every 5 years they are to be reviewed. But does that happen? It doesn't. Let me be very frank. Among all the ministries that have transferred their records, in fact in the past 5 years, we had come up with something called the critical area projects, because the National Archives of India realized that post-independence records are not coming to us. So what is to be done? So we started something called critical area projects, and we started sending our own team of people to different ministries to find out how many post-25-year records are with them, and then do the appraisal and bring them to archive. Ministry of Home Affairs, Ministry of External Affairs, these have been very good. They have transferred to us a lot of records, but Ministry of Defense is one ministry which has been lagging behind. And the best part is they themselves don't know where their records are. Like in 1965, they wanted to commemorate the 1965 war and the 1971 war. Whenever the commemoration part comes, they come to archives. They say, we want photograph, we want record. I said, from where am I to give it to you? Because post-independence Ministry of Defense, we hardly have 2,500 files. That's a pittance. 2,500 files from a ministry like MOD. That's because most of their records, even if it's a casually file, they'll have that automatically. All their folders have that confidential stamp. Somebody has to downgrade it. Somebody has to declassify it. Who will bell the cat? They're not ready to do that. With the result that we don't have Ministry of Defense records. So that is the scenario. But otherwise, most of the ministries are giving us the records. So as per the manual of Departmental Security Instructions, there are also clear-cut guidelines on who is to have these records. If a confidential record is there, it will be in the custody of the section officer concerned. It is restricted also under him. But secret and top secret, it has to be in the custody of a joint secretary. It cannot be, and when he is transferred, he has to formally hand over those records to his incumbent. There has to be a trail, because without that, you lose out on the trail, and that will become a big problem. So when this RTI came and issues of border-related files not being transferred to National Archives of India came up, what Ministry of External Affairs did is, they appointed a lot of their own retired senior IFS officers to go through this, because most of them would have dealt with, like they have these areas, like take China specialists, Russia specialists, right? So they were given those files to browse them and see if they can be downgraded. With the result, a lot of files were downgraded, declassified, and ultimately we have got it. So that is how it is to be done. Without National Archives of India will not accept any file with any security classification, except for maps. Maps are something which do not have a security classification on them, but maps are something, if there is a map related to, say, border areas, we cannot give it to a scholar without appropriate approvals. So anything related to Afghanistan, Tibet, Sikkim, Northeast region, we have to have approvals from 3 ministries: Home Affairs, External Affairs, and Ministry of Defense. To the extent that you know about the tussle between the 7 sisters, Assam versus Manipur and all that. Both of them wanted to have the maps. We didn't give to either of them. We referred the matter to Ministry of Home Affairs. Then they decided not to give the maps to either of them. So we can't. We can at the most show it to them. We don't give them. What they are saying is ultimately it's the government that has to decide, the government that has to decide it, so don't give it to either of them. So we did. So maps are not exactly coming under this written rules. There are issues there. Apart from this, there's another interesting thing on which I'm yet to get complaint. Ministry of Home Affairs has transferred to us a lot of these instruments of accession. Like at the time of partition and when India became independent, most of these, not most, all of these princely states, they acceded to the Union of India. But then we had these Hyderabad, Junagadh and all. Travancore was another one, about which not much is given. But instruments of accession are there, and there's always been a problem. There are issues raised about Hyderabad and Kashmir. People say that we don't have the original. But now we have the originals and it has all been uploaded. Like anybody who wants to see them, there's a virtual library site on Sardar Patel. All these records related to instruments of accession have been uploaded. Along with the instrument of taxation, that's what I want to tell you. But we have a lot of records related to the private property. Private property of all these princely states. Each of them had to give detailed inventory of all their possessions, whether it is movable or immovable. So we have the file related to Hyderabad, it runs to around 600 pages. Right from the silver cutlery to the buildings, everything is listed there. So each and every small, whether it's a small principality or a big state like Hyderabad, everybody has given these instruments. So Ministry of Home Affairs, I don't know the reasons behind that. They have given us, because they are the creators of these records, they have given us written instruction that private property related files, files related to private property of Gwalior and Indore, they are not to be shown to anyone. So as of now, I've been keeping them away. I'm very sure that one day CIC is going to call me over this and say that if everything can be shown, why not this? So anyway, for that we are just custodians. We keep them as per the instructions from the creating agency. So I'm sure Ministry of Home Affairs will have to answer that. So there are these instructions which come to us, but otherwise we accept only open category records.
Archives department is under Ministry of Home Affairs.
No. We are in the Ministry of Culture. I wish it was under Ministry of Home, or rather under Ministry of Personnel, Department of Personnel and Administrative Reform. That would have been better. But we are under Culture. I don't know what you. Now, as far as RTI Act is concerned, I think I had already told you, wherever any institution is funded by Government of India, apart from the main ministries and departments, everybody is covered in RTI. Every citizen has a right to seek information, and we are here as providers of information. We are trying our best, and we are trying to lessen the burden on archives by trying to declare, go for suo motu declarations, like upload as much of information as possible. But it's not easy, considering the bulk of records. I told you we have around 45 kilometers shelf space of record. So can you imagine, even to digitize them, it's not easy. So digitization cannot be done blindly. You have to identify record series. You have to see whether they're physically capable of being digitized. Then you have to ensure that it's in a searchable mode, the metadata. There's so many issues there. But I'll also tell you about the flip side. When digitization started in Government of India, say 10-15 years back, everybody wanted to go for digitization. And what was happening, right? Not just National Archives of India, but main ministries like Ministry of Home, they just scanned their material. They just scanned. Scanning is not digitization. It's not searchable. So what do they use? So literally all that money which went into those scanning procedures have gone waste. So basic idea is to digitize the records so that they are searchable and your originals are safe. That is the idea. And of course, more and more you upload material information in the public domain, it will be easier for the creating agency. But it is a time consuming and not an easy procedure. It's easy to see. We have already uploaded records related to the Nepali, like you know about those. There are 303 files related to Nepali that have been uploaded in the public domain. That is available. Then Sudha Patel, that is uploaded. We'll soon be coming Gandhi Heritage Portal. That's practically going to have all material related to Gandhi. But considering the bulk of records on Gandhi available, it's going to be a very tough task. Then on Gandhi, I've had one decision of CIC saying that Gandhi murder trial papers, that is in our custody. Everything has to be ultimately uploaded. Right now what we have uploaded is a list of Gandhi murder trial papers. There is a story, I'm just sharing the story because I thought that will make it more interesting for you because it's not easy archives and it's not easy to keep in place. Gandhi murder trial papers are in our custody, and honestly when you talk of Gandhi's murder, the only person that comes to your mind is Nathuram Godse. I never went that deep into the Gandhi murder, but there was this RTI applicant who was after our life to see these papers. He wanted that charge sheet of Gandhi murder trial should be provided to him. and the statement should be provided. And the list, the list doesn't reflect clearly. So we invited him to come and consult. He consulted, he took some copies, he went back, but still he went for an appeal. And what he was telling the CIC, I went for the hearing, and the CIC, what he was telling the CIC is that, I've been shown the papers, that is fine, but when these people, there were 8 of them who were accused, and 8 of them were accused, and 3 were absconding. Where are these 3 people? If 3 people related to the assassination of our father of the nation could not be traced by the police, isn't that a shame on the country? So that is where the CIC thought, this is worth investigating. So he has given direction to the PMO, to everybody possible, to trace, what happened to these 3 people. How come that 3 people who were part of the conspiracy, they just went missing? That is interesting. I never knew about those 3 people, never heard their names, but now it seems the police is trying to search out what happened to them. So records, how they are useful and how they can be used to cull out information is very interesting. This is something I've already talked to you in different ways. We have information on almost everything under the sun. You just have to name it and we have it. On education, on religious movement, on social reform movement, on science and technology. Anything that you want to find out, you'll have material on that. On the Geological Survey of India, on marine life, environment, in fact, I also want to tell you that since this is a Sanskrit university, we have around 500 Sanskrit manuscripts in our custody. And these Sanskrit manuscripts have come to us from the personal library of Maharaja of Kashmir. What happened is in 48 when the tribal invasion took place, they were destroying everything. So the Maharaja sent an SOS to Government of India that you have to save my library. And they contain these priceless records. So they were airlifted from Srinagar. And we have those 500 manuscripts in our custody, the Sanskrit manuscript, which it seems are not available anywhere else. I'm not a Sanskrit person, so I won't be able to tell you, but in case anybody wants to see them. And these are 2 of the websites that you can browse in case you want any information on National Archives of India and on Netaji that has already been uploaded. These are all kind of, netajipapers.gov.in. This is a dynamic site, as in when we get more material, we'll be adding on to that. Another thing is, we have, I think that I have not mentioned, I'm sorry about that. We have an online search portal now. It's called Abhilekh Patal. You just have to Google Abhilekh Patal. You have to register yourself in that. We have uploaded information of around 2.1 million references there. That again is only a small fraction of what we have. But again, we hope to upload more and more references, plus add on the digitized information. As and when the files are digitized, they'll be uploaded. So that the problem with that's one reason why I came here. Because I know that not too many people from south or from farther places come to our, it's not easy to come to Delhi. But if information is there on our website, or if there are information shared with the students, that will at least give them this thing to come to archives and spend some time there. Unless and until they come and see the record, they won't understand what is there. I mentioned already about these sources, private papers and one. There is another important collection. These are the Oriental records. Most of these Oriental records are in Persian. In fact, when the British were here, they had a separate department called Persian Department. A lot of correspondence in Persian. In fact, they encouraged their British officials to learn Persian language. There was this Fort William College, which was established in Calcutta, exclusively to train these people in Persian language. So as part of those efforts of the British, we have these Oriental records. But apart from Persian and Arabic, we also have it in other Oriental languages like Bengali, Odia, even Malayalam languages are there. Hindi? Hindi, much later. Hindi, if you see the evolution of Hindi, it's a much later. In fact, many of our Hindi literary persons like Munshi Premchand and all, they used to write in Urdu. Hindi came much later. Although they claim that. And the best part about Oriental records is that many of these records are visually beautiful. Like if they have these gold inscriptions. So for exhibition part, it's one of the most sought after things. So and apart, in fact, nowadays the latest trend is that many of these VVIPs, when they travel abroad, they ask us to search out important, visually striking records so that they can create facsimile of that and present it to the country they are visiting. So that is additional job for us to search out what could be visually attractive. Yeah. So in fact they tell me, see for some maps. Maps are there. Maps are something which they want to have. Maps or something with gold adorned manuscripts. Anyway, that's okay. So long as they are not asking for the materials. I've been telling you about the paper records that are in our custody. Apart from that, we also have a lot of microfilms of records of Indian interests which are in other parts of the world. Like you know about the history of India. It's but obvious that we have had relations with the Dutch, the French, the Portuguese. It's obvious that our records will be there in other countries also. In fact, just 2 months back, our DG, he was in Portugal on a visit, and we acquired records which are over 700 years old. What the Portuguese had done is, they used to have the records, but they used to take it back also. They never left behind anything. Goa is one place where the Portuguese records are there. But then they told us, we have these huge gaps, we don't have anything, we don't know what the records are. So our DG went, and as per the MOU signed between the two countries, we got the digitized version of those records. So at least now we are able to connect. So similarly, records of Indian interest on events, personalities, these are all available in countries like UK, USA, Germany, Switzerland, Russia, like almost all over the world. We have a lot of these records, especially on revolutionaries. On revolutionaries, if you see, many of them are working from abroad, right? Dr. Champakraman Pillai, somebody is working on him. Probably he wants to write a script or something. So just 2 weeks back, they wanted to know where his personal papers are. It's not with us, but we have microfilm rolls related to him. But his personal papers are in Nehru Memorial Museum. Similarly, Subhash Chandra Bose, a lot of records are outside the country. Like Gandhi, of course, we have a lot. We have a lot of information, and we have been acquiring them under CEP or through purchase. Mostly under CEP, Cultural Exchange Program. We give some, they give us some. Like that. With because the countries in the Gulf or the Southern Asian region, they were managed from India. So we have a lot of records, and many of these countries would be having records related to India with them also. So we can easily go for an exchange program. Now comes the question, this is something I'm sure those of you who visited archives would have faced. When you come to archives, you consult the index and you request for a document. But very often the the slips come back with remarks like NT. NT means the first thing that strikes you is not traceable. It is not that. It is not transferred. Not transferred, under search, brittle. These are the comments which we often come across. And it's very irritating, especially not transferred. The question will be, if it is not here, where will it be? If it's of pre-independence period, we can always say that it will not be anywhere else. If it is not there, take it for granted that it would have been weeded out. Why? Because, as I said in the beginning itself, each and every time a record is created, it has a predestined life cycle. It will remain current for some time. As per its value, there is something called a retention schedule. Each and every government department, I'm talking about government records right now, each and every government department has something called a retention schedule. Retention schedule decides the longevity or for how long a record is to be maintained. If a record is to be destroyed after 3 years, fine, it will be destroyed. So there are laid down procedures. Only as per the retention schedule can you retain a record for a certain time period. And what decides the retention schedule? Basically the government policy. And if you see the British time period record, most of the records that are in our custody, they are related to the political issues or the administrative issues. Issues that are being given importance nowadays, like socio-economic research topics or environmental issues. These were they were not that important for the administrators at that time. Okay, you created hospitals, you did that, women's education, they created schools and all, but they may not think of retaining the file permanently. With the result that you end up saving only those records which have a political meaning or which could have been used for their administration. The remaining would have been destroyed. So for a person, for a historian or a researcher who is working on environmental issues, please think, where are these records gone? So these records would have been destroyed. They would have been destroyed much earlier, only as per the retention. Another thing, like the terminology I used, environment. This is almost a current usage. If you want to see colonial period records related to environment, please don't look for terminology like environment. You'll have to look for rainfall, you'll have to look for forest, you'll have to look for floods. Those are the kind of catchwords you'll have to look for. Basic conflict with the historian comes when the historian wants that everything should be there. If a file is created, it should be there. Why would anybody destroy the file? But the thing is, it's practically not possible. For the archivists, we have to cut down on the number of files that are kept permanently. Only very, very important. Like the issue of appraising or evaluating a record. That's a joint exercise between, at the end of 25 years, it's a joint exercise between the National Archives of India and the concerned ministry. Both of us are together. They see it from their point of view and we see it from the historical point of view, and then we treat it. I'll give you one example of one series that have come to us which is really causing a lot of problems. Freedom Fighters Division. When Government of India decided to give pension to the freedom fighters, they advertised it in the newspaper and asked people to come up with proof of their having participated in the freedom struggle. And lakhs of people applied. They would have given some proof or the other. Ultimately, I think 1.2 lakh people were given the pensioners, benefits, freedom fighters pension. But the remaining 1 lakh plus, that still is there. So what has happened is, National Archives of India, one of our officers decided that, okay, fine that he didn't get the pension, but at least he applied. Let's see what kind of information, what kind of proof he has given. Maybe the government clerk decided that this is not worth it, but at least he has enclosed some proof. Maybe some newspaper clipping or some photograph. So we decided to accept them in totality. So, but there is I personally feel, if he has not been given the pension, then it's not worth it. I don't know how it is going to be used at a later stage, but this is the conflict. And I'm sure that it's up to the historians how they're going to use the material. Rehabilitation division is another. Rehabilitation division, I told you about the landed property, the claims and compensation. The number of files I'm expected to get. I've got only 2 lakh till now. We have another building with around 12 lakh files. Only related to claims and compensation. And they are all going to come up with some legal issues. When we talk of the conflict between the historians and the archivists, there is another concern of archives, that is how to ensure the longevity of a record. As far as we are concerned, we should ensure that the records are there for posterity. If the records are destroyed, they are gone forever, isn't it? Earlier the system was, till say around early 1990s, people used to copy everything by hand. Because by then, photocopying techniques were not allowed into archives. people were either copying or asking typescripts to be made. Like there used to be typists who would type them out, but that was a time-consuming thing. So instead of waiting for the typist to type it out, they would say, okay, let me just copy the important extracts, and they'll go happy with that. Archives, there was no issue, but Bengal State Archives, till date, whatever they are copying, they have to have approval of the Ministry of Home Affairs, Department of Home Affairs or something. The extracts are given for scrutiny, and only those scrutinied extracts are released to the scholar. But in archives around 1996, we allowed the use of laptop. So that was an easier method for people to, but then laptops were still not very popular. I mean, people didn't have money, I suppose. But now, of course, laptop every second person is having. Side by side, we have introduced photocopying technology. That increased the number of copies being taken. Initially, it was very nice, everybody was getting copies. But I myself started observing that the files are getting destroyed. Because every time a file is photocopied, you open up a file. So that means the spine, it's eating into the spine, you're destroying the original record. So now what we have started doing is we have started digitizing, and we also make it an effort to convince the scholar that go for scanning, so that the record is not destroyed. And once scanned, we can always migrate it to our own digital data bank, create the metadata and everything. So after that, it will not done. Side by side, we are also digitizing series. Like all immigration related records are already digitized. All records related to reforms office, that is all digitized. So slowly we are building. Now education department, almost everything is digitized. So they'll all be uploaded and the original will not be given. So this is a major concern for the archivists. Apart from that, this is the Abhilekh Patel I was mentioning. You can note down this URL because this will be very useful for anybody who wants to find out what kind of material is there. While digitizing, as I said, we have to be very careful that whatever we are digitizing, it's not done again. It should be a one-time effort where the originals are safe and it should be in a searchable mode. Otherwise, it's not going to be of any use. Another concern for archivists is that our profession is not growing. We have less and less people opting for archives as a profession. That could be because of the government neglect. But I would personally love it if more and more people started at least looking to that side as an option. Because unless and until the younger generation is interested in maintaining or safeguarding their own documentary heritage, it's not going to help the country in the long run.
Department is offering a course.
They are?
Can you just tell them?
Oh yes. I'll also tell you about, we have a School of Archival Studies where we offer a one-year diploma it's a PG diploma in Records and Archives Management. It's a full one-year course where you can learn about archives, and as I said, business archives is one field which is coming up in a big way. Even if the central government and state government archives are not opening up, but definitely business archives is opening up. They are asking, they are building it up in a big way. Most of these business houses, they are increasing it also. And the banks, they are also asking for it. Many of them ask us to provide these, so that should be a good option. And we have short-term certificate courses also on various aspects related to archiving. Conservation, retrography, record management, archives management, all these are different fields, and anybody interested in that, you just have to keep a tab on our website. We keep advertising, and in fact right now the short-term course in record management, September is the last day. So anybody interested can look up that. As I've been saying, archives is the center of our documentary heritage, and it's our duty to popularize the archival sources. It will help them help the country also. In case we want to instill that pride in ourselves, in case we want to, because that is the that is something which is being prodded nowadays. The national pride. this is the right place to look at that. We have enough material, you should know how to use it. Don't use it in a negative way, use it in a positive way. Everything possible can be done. And archives, of course, has the responsibility of sharing information. We try to go for more and more outreach programs so that people know about archives, so that people know about the documentary heritage in our custody. We have regular exhibitions, open house programs are there. In fact, now of course we are going for virtual, and in fact there's a mobile exhibition also being planned. Each and every state is to get it on Sadapati. That's basically on the records which are in our custody. So understand that people know, what if they wouldn't know? It's okay that till now people don't know about Sadapati and his contribution, but somehow we have at least 7-8 exhibitions lined up in the next 6-7 months, so that should also be, I'm sure that it's going to be uploaded also. So that will help the people. Challenges, I've already touched upon this. Retrieval of information is a big challenge, especially when common citizens come. They don't know how to search out material from the archives. They expect that they'll come to me saying that, my grandfather was in the Indian National Army, he died, my grandmother is there, she wants to avail the pension. So I want to have records related to him. So from where am I to search it out? So unless we have military department records, INA is something people related to INA or people who had participated in INA, the decision to grant them pension was a much later decision. So there are a lot of complications. So how to search out materials? We won't have that kind of time to sit with each of them and help them cull out the material. For a common citizen, that will be a challenge. And most of these records are in English. Rashtrabhasha is here to set in, so they should be well aware of English, otherwise they won't be able to search it out. And the other issues, I have already talked to you about that. I think I'll stop it at that. In case you have any questions, I am ready to answer. I'm sure you may have.